Hi guys, it's Miss Connolly. I'm in my kitchen, welcome. I have so many leftover ripe bananas that I was thinking we could make some banana bread today. So you're going to help me make 2 batches of banana bread because I have so many bananas that I need to do something with. So when someone makes 1 batch of a recipe, that means they make the recipe 1 time. When you have so many ingredients or so many people to feed that you need to make more than 1 batch of the recipe, that's called making 2 batches or 3 batches or 4 batches. This recipe that we're making calls for or needs 3 ripe bananas. I have 6 bananas, so I know I can make 2 batches of banana bread because I know that when I multiply 3 times 2, that gives me 6. So for this recipe, I need 6 bananas if I'm making 2 batches of banana bread. So we're gonna go through the rest of the ingredients. I'll show you what we need, and then we're gonna do the math to figure out how much of each ingredient I need if I'm going to make 2 batches instead of 1. So to make 1 batch of banana bread, we need 3 ripe bananas. I need 1 cup of oats. We are going to need 1 cup of flour, a half a teaspoon of salt, need 1 tablespoon of cinnamon. We're going to need 1 1/4 tablespoons of baking soda. Need a half a cup of melted coconut oil. We're going to need 3/4 a cup of maple syrup, 1 teaspoon of lemon juice, 1 teaspoon of vanilla, and lots of chocolate chips. So first I have 1 cup of oats. For 1 batch of banana bread, I need 1 cup of oats. So that means if I'm making 2 batches of banana bread, I'm going to need to multiply 1 cup of oats times the 2 batches that I'm making. So I know that 1 times 2 equals 2. So when I use this ingredient now, I know I'm going to need 2 cups of oats. 2 cups of oats. One. 2. For this recipe, I also need 1 cup of flour, but I'm making 2 batches, so I'm going to need 2 cups of flour. I know the math for this one already because I just multiplied 1 cup of oats times the 2 batches that I'm making. So I can use that same equation I just used for 1 cup of flour for 2 cups of flour. So I'm gonna mark on here that I need 2 cups for 2 batches. 2 cups of flour. Here's my 1 cup. One. 2. I'm also gonna need a half a teaspoon of salt. Remember, I need a half a teaspoon of salt for 1 batch of banana bread, but I'm making 2 batches of banana bread. So I'm going to have to multiply the 2 batches of banana bread I'm making times 1/2 of a teaspoon of salt. So I know when I'm multiplying fractions, there's 2 different things I could do. I could multiply across, making my 2 whole number into a fraction. I know 2 times 1 is 2, and I know 1 times 2 is 2. I know that 2 halves gives me 1 whole. So I need 1 whole teaspoon of salt. Another way I could do this is by drawing a picture. So if I have a half a teaspoon, I know my tape diagram or my fraction bar is going to need to be broken up into 2 parts, into halves. I know that I'm going to need how many halves? I'm going to need 2. So I'll color in my halves, 1, 2, until I have 2 halves, which I know equals 1 whole fraction bar. So again, I'm going to need 1 whole teaspoon of salt. 1 teaspoon of salt, 1 teaspoon, salt, now I have 1 tablespoon of cinnamon. I know, like I did before, I can take my 1 tablespoon times the 2 batches I'm making of banana bread, and again, that will give me 2, because 1 times 2 equals 2. So on my recipe card, I'm gonna write 2 tablespoons. 2 tablespoons of cinnamon. So I have my tablespoon again, and my cinnamon. One. Whoa. 2. Whoops. This one's a little bit trickier. For this one, I need 1 1/4 teaspoons of baking soda. So I know that I have 1 1/4. I know that I need to multiply this by the 2 batches of banana bread that I'm making. So I'm gonna split this number up. I'm going to multiply 1 times 2, and then I'm going to multiply 1/4 times 2. Okay? So I know that 1 times 2 equals 2 wholes. Then when I'm multiplying 1/4 times 2, again, I can do that 2 ways. I can multiply with my whole number, 2 over 1 times 1/4, and multiply across. 2 times 1 equals 2. 1 times 4 equals 4. Now I know I have 2/4. Or I could draw a picture. So I know that I need fourths. So I'm gonna make my fraction bar. That fraction bar is going to have 4 parts because 4 is my denominator. I know I need to color in 2 1/4. Now I have 1 1/4. Now I have 2 1/4. So now I'm finished coloring in my fraction bar. I know that the picture shows that I have 2 colored in out of 4. So I know I have 2/4. Remember, this 2/4 came from multiplying this 1/4 times 2, and this 2 came from multiplying the 1 whole times 2. So my answer is not just 2/4, and it's not just 2 wholes, it's 2 wholes and 2/4. I could also say 2 wholes and 1/2, because this 2/4 represents 1/2 of my whole fraction bar. So 2 1/2. I need 2 1/2 teaspoons of baking soda. So here's my 1/2 teaspoon. Here's my teaspoon. I'm gonna fill them with baking soda. 1. 2. This recipe that we're making calls for or needs 3 ripe bananas. I know that when I multiply 3 times 2, that gives me 6. So for this recipe, I need 6 bananas if I'm making 2 batches of banana bread. 1 banana, 2 bananas, 3 bananas, 4 bananas, 5 bananas, 6 bananas. Now I have a 1/2 cup of melted coconut oil. So I have 1/2 times the 2 batches of banana bread that I'm making. Again, I could do this 2 different ways. I could multiply straight across. Here's my 2 wholes. Here's my 1/2. 2 times 1 is 2, and 1 times 2 is also 2. I know that 2 halves equals 1 whole. I can show that in a picture by making my fraction bar, dividing it in half, and coloring in 2 1/2s, right? Because I have 1/2 times 2. So I have 2 1/2s. This gives me 2 halves, which I said equals 1 whole fraction bar, or 1 whole cup of melted coconut oil. I need 1 cup of melted coconut oil. So I'm gonna scoop some coconut oil out of here. put it in my 1 cup, and then I'm gonna put it in the microwave to melt. 1 cup. This one's also a little bit trickier. I have 3/4 of a cup of maple syrup. So I know I'm making 2 batches of banana bread, and I need 2 times the amount of maple syrup that I have here. So I have 2 times 3/4. I can do this the same ways I did before. So I can multiply 2 wholes times 3/4. I know that 2 times 3 gives me 6. And I know that 1 times 4 gives me 4. I notice that my numerator is bigger than my denominator. So I'm gonna have to figure out how many wholes I have and how many parts left over. So I have 4ths. I'm gonna draw my fraction bar and break it up into 4ths. I'm going to color it in until I get 6/4. So I have 1/4, 2/4, 3/4, 4/4. That's not enough. I'm going to need more. So I'm going to draw another fraction bar, break it up into 4ths. And I'm going to color it in until I have 6/4. So I had 1/4, 2/4, 3/4, 4/4, 5/4, 6/4. I'm going to see how many holes I have. I have 1 whole fraction bar. And I have 2/4 left over. So I know my answer is 1 whole cup of maple syrup and 2/4 of a cup of maple syrup. Something else I could say is 1.5 cups of maple syrup, because I know this 2/4 represented in my fraction bar is equivalent to 1/2. I need 1.5 cups of maple syrup now. So I have 1 cup and I have 1/2 cup. And 1/2 cup. This is gonna be sweet. I also need 1 teaspoon of lemon juice. Again, I'm going to take my 2 batches of banana bread I'm making, multiply it by the 1 teaspoon of lemon juice, and I know that 2 times 1 equals 2. I can do the same thing for our last ingredient, 2 batches times 1 teaspoon of vanilla. And I know, again, that equals 2. My final ingredient is lots of chocolate chips. I'm not gonna measure this because I'm gonna add as many as I have because it's chocolate. I need 2 teaspoons of lemon juice. Here's my teaspoon. Here's my lemon. I need 2 teaspoons of vanilla. Here's my teaspoon. Here's my vanilla. Now I'm gonna mash it up a little bit. Ew, 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 ew. And the best part, lots of chocolate chips. Yup. And then the last thing I have to do before I put it in the oven is just put this in with this. All right, it's all mixed. Now I'm gonna put half of it in my loaf pan to cook because I made 2 batches, so I'm gonna have to fill my loaf pan twice and put it in the oven, and it's gonna be all set. Thank you for helping me make banana bread today. There's gonna be more recipes on Google Classroom you can multiply, so let me know what you come up with. I miss you guys.